Action.
Oh, hello. Do you know what a garden gnome is? It's a statue of a little man that people put in their gardens for good luck. I used to have a yellow one in my backyard, and the only problem was that my dog was nearsighted and he thought it was a fire hydrant. So every morning he would go outside and let's just say I hated to see something like that happen to anything with a long white beard and a little red cap. So I gave my gnome to my friend Cindy, who used it to keep animals from digging in her garden. It was kind of like a scarecrow, but Cindy called it a scare gopher. I think the gnome must have been happier there because he had a respectable job and he usually stayed dry. Now, this story is about another garden gnome, a very mysterious one, who may or may not be causing a great deal of trouble. The story is the winner of an honorable mention in my 2011 Be a Famous Writer contest, and it's by Jared Spry of Arizona, and it's called Eugene, Fitz and the Impish, Sly, Mischievous Garden Gnome. Eugene Fitz crouched secretly behind a clump of oleander bushes, peering through the tangled branches into his backyard. The garden gnome had not yet moved, though Eugene knew it would, and this time he'd be there to catch it, for now he knew the truth, and the gnome's mischievous hijinks would come to an end. Eugene had been crouching behind the oleanders for 15 minutes, growing restless. He shifted his weight from the back to the front of his feet, and the football helmet that he wore clanked against a loose branch. He grasped the branch with his chubby fingers and held it still. His pudgy thighs and ankles began to burn, and his neck began to ache from supporting his older brother's football helmet, which was oversized for his bulbous 8-year-old head. He carefully withdrew the list of suspects and again reviewed it for what seemed like the 100th time. Eugene considered himself among the greatest of detectives thanks to his hero, Sherlock Holmes. Surely the mystery of the backyard's wreckage was solvable using the techniques of the world's greatest detective. Eugene's list of suspects was scribbled hastily in red crayon on the backside of his math homework. It read, Chub, John, Mom and Dad, Billy, my neighbor to the right, and garden gnome. Chub, Eugene's fat boxer, had to be innocent. The dog was certainly capable of tearing apart Mom's flower garden and ripping up Dad's newly planted sod. In fact, Chub could even have flung mud to the kitchen window. However, Chub could not have opened the locked toy bin with his thick padded paws and obvious lack of opposable thumbs. Eugene's older brother, John, was originally the prime suspect. He had a motive, humiliating Eugene, and means opposable thumbs. However, John lacked the strategic intellect to cause such destruction unnoticed. John could not walk across the living room floor without tripping over his own feet and knocking over a lamp. Eugene had immediately decided his parents were poor suspects. Mom had no motive to destroy her own flower garden, nor Dad to tear up his fresh green lawn. Eugene found it difficult to imagine his parents faking the anger they displayed had they created the damage themselves. Besides, it would be illogical to create a mess only to later clean it up. Billy, though, a reasonable suspect, was cut from the list by information obtained through his mother. Simply put, Billy was unavailable during said incident. Shortly after discovering the carnage of his backyard, Eugene knocked on Billy's front door, intending to interrogate him. Billy's mother answered and told Eugene Billy was sick with fever and had been for several days. So, unless the mother was in on the entire scheme, which was possible but unlikely, Billy was innocent. Garden gnome was underlined on Eugene's list with a black Sharpie marker. It was the only option left. Whatever remains, however improbable, and this is what Sherlock Holmes said, when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains must be the truth. Eugene knew it must be the garden gnome. He peered from behind the oleander's twisted branches at his arch-enemy, his Professor Moriarty. The gnome stood with his hands cupped behind his back, looking like he was ready to run off skipping and whistling. Including his pointy red hat, the gnome was half Eugene's height, and his wispy white beard covered the top half of his blue-belted frock. Tall leather boots finished the ensemble. Innocent appearance aside, Eugene knew him to be wicked and devious. As the sun approached midday, Eugene grew tired, and staying awake proved very difficult for his obsession. Until he could take it no longer, his eyelids felt like lead, and he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Eugene woke some time later, confused, trying to recollect the morning's activities. Well, why am I in the oleander bush? Why am I wearing John's football helmet? And then he remembered. Panicking, he tore from the oleander bush and stared aghast at the backyard. Destruction! The yard was in ruin. The garden gnome was gone, replaced by a pile of torn dandelions. Eugene's prized dinosaur toys were strewn across the yard like freshly mowed grass. His water guns lay dripping in the gravel. Fresh mud was thrown over all the windows, along with other debris. Mother's garden was destroyed. Plants rooted and shredded like confetti. All that remained were a few filthy roots and scattered leaves. Then he heard her voice, the voice of doom. "Eugene, I'm home." The voice of Eugene's mother called from inside. "I hope you cleaned the yard, Eugene." Eugene froze, unable to breathe. His heart thudded rapidly within his chest. Cold sweat dripped into his eyes. His mother opened the back door with a short-lived smile, her eyes quickly focusing on the devastation. "Eugene!" his mother gasped. "What have you done?" Eugene stuttered as he protested. But Mom, I wasn't. I didn't." Eugene's mother put her hands on her hips and glared, unconvinced. "I don't want to hear it, Eugene. Go to your room," she pointed. As the unfortunate young boy walked to his room, where he would spend the rest of the evening upon his bed, he caught sight of the garden gnome. It stood smugly in the far corner of the yard. With ghastly terror, Eugene was able to spy the small grin upon its face. The end.